welcome back to my channel. My name is Afe if you're new here. Today we'll be talking about some materials that I would recommend when it comes to LSAT prep and some steps or tips that I think should also be taken when it comes to studying for the LSAT. So let's get right into When it comes to materials I recommend, I just want to preface that in preparing for the LSAT, there are so many different routes one could take. You take a course, or you get a tutor, or you self-study. I personally did a little bit of each of them, and I think that they all have their benefits and possibly their cons. And I will also talk about that when I decide to talk about my entire LSAT journey with you guys, but I just wanted to let you know that there are different options and you could use those materials in a way that suits you and works best for your study methods. So the first LSAT prep I would recommend is number one, the actual LSAT prep test. I can't state this enough because when it comes to preparing for the LSAT, there is no better resource than actually using the actual past questions, because that's the kind of questions that you will see when you actually sit for the real thing. So it's best to prepare with the actual material that the LSAT creators have made available. Also, you could use Khan Academy. It's a new material that came out like 2-3 years ago, and I think it's a great resource because it is also very affordable and something that you could take with you on the go. Everything is digital, so if you need something that you could study with while you getting to work or working out something, that is one resource that I think I would recommend because Khan Academy is linked with LSAT, so they also provide LSAT material. And then you have the 7-stage course. 7-stage is a fabulous resource that I found a couple months into my studying, and I think it's very valuable because they really break down the LSAT into really digestible components. And the 7-stage forum is also amazing because so many other LSAT students are on there and they're very willing to help you out with any questions you have. And also you have access to the organizer JY, who is amazing. Like, he always organizes like webinars and study sessions for students, so you actually get to hear from him and pick his brain and get an insight into how to actually achieve a good score on the LSAT and how to properly study for the test. And another resource is the Lsat Trainer. I used this a little later into my studying after I had done so many retakes, but when I finally got access to it, it was very, very useful for me because I feel like it personally helped to, it personally helped to solidify my knowledge that I gained from 7-stage because they seem to complement each other. And so, being that it's a hard copy book and it contains all the sections in it, it's also very useful and very valuable because you could just carry one book with you on the go. And if you're just getting into it, like, it really breaks down the test for you and how to have a proper mindset when it comes to approaching the LSAT and its different sections. And then you have PowerScope. PowerScope was the very first material that I got into. A lot of people raved about it, so I was like, why not? And I also liked PowerScope, but I found that the material, there wasn't really helping me get what I wanted. Like, they break everything down for you, but it didn't suit my study style. So later on I decided to switch that up. But at the end of the day, I think PowerScore is a great resource. They have the 3 trilogy books, and that is they're called the PowerScore Bibles, and they have the logic reasoning, logic games, and reading comprehension. I personally don't think I ever really opened the reading comprehension for some reason, but I can't say enough about the logic games and the logical reasoning because that was my foundation for the LSAT, and it really helped me going forward. So those are some of the resources I think that will be very helpful when it comes to preparing for the LSAT, because I can't see enough of preparing with the actual LSAT questions is also very helpful, and each of these resources provide access to that. Yeah, and I'll speak a lot about 7 Sage later on, because that was the course that I ended up spending a lot of my time using. And so at the end of the day, that is what I have a lot of experience with, and I will share that when, as I said, I talk about my entire LSAT journey. And then now moving into when it comes to the LSAT tips that I have to offer you. So I think one thing that can't be overstated is proper reviewing of your test. Like, it is not enough to just be like, I have taken several prep tests and that's it. You need to be able to sit down and be able to articulate clearly, either in writing, which I will strongly advise, because there's nothing that can be said. I mean, there's been so much research done about actually handwriting your notes, and if typing is your thing, go ahead and type up your responses. But being able to understand why an answer choice is correct and why the others are wrong can really help you to see how the LSAT writers are thinking about these questions and how they're constructing them and what they think makes the answer the best choice for a question. So properly reviewing your answer, your material, your prep test after taking them will be very valuable. And during my study, I used the method that 7 Sage recommends, which is blind review, and I'll leave a link down below in the description box. That basically, you, after you take your test, you look at the ones that you're not really sure of and then re-answer them on timed, and you kind of gauge where your understanding is. Is it that you're having a timing issue, or you don't understand the material at all? And I think that could be very helpful when it comes to really focusing on your weak areas, because when you know what area is weak for you, you're able to properly dive in and just drill as many times as possible. So another thing I'll mention is to take as many prep tests as possible. I know that I have been saying prep tests. How do you access these prep tests? So most of the resources that I've mentioned, they all do have prep tests, but if you want a ton more, I believe that I have a couple that I have access to, so I will create a Google Doc and put that all in there for you guys, or Google Drive, whatever it's called, and put that all in there for you guys. And then if you also want some more, you could get them on Amazon. I know you can get the bundle, like 10 past questions in one, and you could get that all on Amazon. And it's also a very great resource, because as I said, you really want to practice with the real deal, so you don't get into the test room and you're just confused, like, I've never seen this kind of questions before. Speaking on practice tests, I would highly recommend you take them in the actual test day conditions. So I know it's easy to think, well, you know, I'm the only one here taking this test, nobody's looking at me, I don't really care, and give yourself a couple extra seconds, a couple extra minutes, thinking it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, because when you get into the test day, you don't have any access to do that. Like, you're given 35 minutes, and 35 minutes is 35 minutes, and if you go a second over, if they say pencils down and you don't have your pencils down, that could cost you the entire test, and you don't want that. I mean, like, you've worked hard to get to this point, and to have that happen to you will be really frustrating and devastating. So anything that you could do, practice in conditions where you know that this is going, practice with the 35 minutes strictly timed, and then practice in environments where they're slightly uncomfortable. So for me, I practiced in the library, practiced in the coffee shop. Sometimes I did a lot of drills on the train while I was going to volunteer, and it really helps to develop your focus, because that's really what you need. Because on the test day, you never know where your testing condition is going to be like. Maybe someone is sick in the room as you are, and they're sniffling and they're coughing, and someone's scratching their pen on the table, you know. You never know what you're going to meet on test day, so be prepared as much as possible. And one thing that you can control is being able to focus regardless of the situation you find yourself in. And okay, another thing is to add some form of exercise into your routine. I know I touched a little bit on this in the last video, where I said that you should be careful of burnout and just make sure that you take time for yourself. I can't emphasize this enough because burnout is real. And I'm not kidding. Like, when it hits you hard. It hits you hard. And I'm being honest with you, because you get to a point where sometimes you don't feel like studying at all, and that happens normally. But when that burnout hits, you're wasting precious time. You know, this is time that you could be using to actually improve, or like really get work, doing some actual work and improving on your stuff. But when burnout hits, like, you can't really accomplish anything, and sometimes people lose track of their end goal because of burnout, and you don't want that for yourself. So try to do something that would ease off the tension, because you're sitting down a lot for hours on end if you're studying full time, and something to just take off all of that, because at the end of the day, your mental health is still key, and you just want to be in the best possible shape as you can. And now I'm going to be talking about each section and kind of a few tips that I think would be very, very helpful when it comes to approaching them. So the first section I'll be talking about is logic games. Logic games is, as I said before, a section that a lot of people find very alien and really difficult to understand, and that is really understandable. But it is also one of the sections that I found that you could really learn and really put in the work and find results, because it is a section that they kind of switch up. The real core of it still remains the same. They might just switch up the way they structure the questions and whatever, but from the beginning, from prep test 1 until prep test 85, or whatever number it is right now, like, you will find that a lot of the same tests, like, sometimes they sort of repeat the fundamentals of that section. So I personally took every single prep test logic game section. I personally took every single logic game section until the test that was already available for us, because I felt that that was a weak section for me and I needed as much practice as possible. And I think that really helped me out, because you begin to develop an understanding of how to gain inferences and being able to quickly pick out the right answer choice without really having to work out every single scenario. So yes, I would highly recommend that. And a method that I used was the 7-stage foolproof method. I will leave a link down in the description box, because that method, I think it has changed my life and it has changed so many people's lives, and it really will help you see improvement when it comes to your LG section. And now into the LR section. LR section can be a beast in and of itself. One way to approach this section is to really focus on drilling the question types that you find challenging. So sometimes, for some people like me, I found necessary assumptions difficult, flow arguments difficult, weekend questions difficult. A lot of the questions that had to deal with being able to identify the assumptions, and what I did was to drill them several times over, so you get so there are different levels of the question type. So you have, at least for the 7th, 8, they had the level 1 questions and level 5 questions, and I kind of had to drill each level so I understand where I'm at and like what specific levels are difficult for me. And then when you drill that out, you're able to move on to the next one. And when it came to drilling as well, like, I used to take pictures of the question types and have like a folder of them on my phone, so while I'm on the go, I'm also studying, because time is precious, and as much as you want to be able to do stuff outside of the LSAT world, LSAT can be really consuming. And if you're somebody that is extra type A and really feels like you need to be doing something LSAT related every time, I think that's one way to help you out, because you're not fully committed to studying, but you're also keeping your brain active and trying to learn stuff all at the same time. And when it comes to RC, which is the reasoning comprehension section, I found that science passages were a little difficult for me, so I tried to read a lot of long form passages, and I mostly focused on articles from Scientific American. I believe they have a discount for students. I think it's $12 for like a certain 6 months or something like that. I'm not too sure. Don't quote me on that, but it is very affordable, and I use that to really hone in on how I approached reading comprehension, because a lot of the reading comprehension you find on the LSAT is kind of structured in the same way, the writing style and all of